Welcome to our session about 21st century skills for leaders. Please allow me to introduce our guests today. I'll start with Mr. Ari Poka. Mr. Ari Poka is a Finnish principal, teacher, and author who's passionate about realizing the potential of all students. His current book, Top Class: How to Manage a Finnish School, tells Mr. Poka's story of a school principal helping to develop the Finnish educational system into a world-renowned high-performance system based on placing students at the heart of the process and training competent teachers with outstanding kids. Mr. Poka has been at the heart of the Finnish educational system. He's the former president of the International Confederation of Principals and has held the position of principal at several schools. Mr. Poka is also an active in numbers of principals associations, including the Central Finland's Principals Association. And he has a master's degree in philosophy from Finland. Now I'll move to Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul challenges our culture's belief that intelligence, endlessly measured by test scores, is the sole indicator of value in our education system. It's not. In how children succeed, he ushers in a tidal change in thinking and argues that non-cognitive skills or character are better indicators of success: curiosity, consciousness, optimism, self-control, and grit. In his latest book, Helping Children Succeed: What Works and Why, 2016, education speaker Paul Tough offers a practical guidebook for improving the lives of children growing up in adversity, containing all new strategies based on the emerging science of success. He's also a contributing writer to the New York Times Magazine. Tough is also the author of Whatever It Takes: Geoffrey Canada's Quest to Change Harlem and America, which focuses on the steps necessary to improve the lives and education of underserved children. Welcome, and let me start by this question to Mr. Paul. What are our schools lacking in the 21st century? What's missing out there?
That's a great question. So I think that we have a lot of schools here and around the world that are doing a very good job of teaching students the basics of delivering academic information. But I think that in many of our countries, over the last couple of decades especially, we have been in the grip of this idea that I sometimes call the cognitive hypothesis. It's this idea that the one quality that matters in a child's success is his or her IQ. We're obsessed with intelligence. And we think that success is all about this narrow band of cognitive skills that get measured on standardized tests. I think this is why so many of us are obsessed with these test scores. But the educators and the scientists who I have reported on and written about have identified this other set of qualities that they say matter at least as much as IQ, and maybe more so, in children's success. And that includes things like grit and perseverance, curiosity, conscientiousness, self-control, and optimism. And I think that many of our schools struggle to deliver these skills, these qualities to students. Many of the educators, I think, have been able to identify that these skills are important, but they're not always sure how to deliver them. And it's a conundrum. How do we develop character in students? How do we help students learn character strengths? That, I think, is what a lot of our schools lack. We haven't figured out the answer to that question.
I move to Mr. Ari. We've seen many of our audience have also seen that video where Finnish children, they're playing, they're hiking, they're baking, they're climbing trees. And actually, I personally envy those children for spending time playing. So what do they learn in school?
I think they actually learn quite a lot, because there's two things. Actually, I can truly say that when I look at the Finnish schools, the practical normal schools days, the school is quite an effective one. It's well planning, and the teachers are highly professionals. But actually the second thing, and it's coming about this moral discussion, is that I think that the very basis of the Finnish education is how we protect the childhood. And protecting the childhood means that the school must be also the place where the students' well-being is the one of the main issue. And the well-being is, okay, climbing the trees. We are living in the country where there are more trees than maybe anywhere else, so it's a part of our national hobby. But anyway, I think it's a big questions about that we think about it, children as a whole, not only about, like Paul said, the knowledge-based learning, but also the skills and that kind of feeling that the school is the place where the students can actually learn not only about the math, science, or languages, but also the way to be that kind of social member of the society, and that's very important. So they learn a lot, and I think that playing the games and having the good time in the school it's a part of the whole motivation to be in the school, so it's important.
Mr. Paul, I'm sure there are parents who have or will tell you that they send their children to school to learn math, grammar, biology, and they will teach them the virtues at home. So how would you answer them?
I think that's true, and I think there is certainly some truth to it. I think that maybe the main place that children learn morality and character is at home and in their community. But to answer that question a little bit, I want to talk about a couple of schools that I reported on in New York City that were struggling with exactly this question. And so these were schools that very much believed that morality is something, and character was something that happened at home, and that academics were something that happened in school. One school was called the KIPP Infinity Charter School. It was a school that served mostly low-income students in Harlem. The other was the Riverdale Country School, a private school that served mostly high-income students. But a few years ago, the two principals who led these two schools found themselves in this similar situation, which was that they were doing a great job of preparing their students academically, but they felt like there was something missing in what they were giving to their students, that they were producing students who were great test takers and great at applying to college, but who were lacking the grit or the self-discipline or the inner strength to deal with real challenges in life. And so that was what pushed them to overcome the divide that you're describing, to persuade students and parents that it wasn't enough to just teach academic subjects.
Values do differ from one culture to the other. Virtues do differ from one society to the other. What's common? How can you spread your theory about these virtues now in the 21st century? I'm sure it's very hard.
It is, you're right. And so, well, to stay on these two schools, which are a big part of what I reported on, they actually started working with a team of psychologists from the University of Pennsylvania who had made this academic study of character and all of its constituent parts. And working with them, they came up with 7 character strengths that they decided were the most important, and that's what they have focused on. Their 7 were grit, curiosity, social intelligence, gratitude, self-control, optimism, and zest. So some of these are different than ones that might be focused on in other schools. But their list, they felt, were ones that were not only important for students to develop to become sort of fully rounded adults, but also were essential to learning. That without things like curiosity and zest and optimism, it was difficult to learn those other academic subjects. So part of their answer, I think, to this question is rather than think of these as two separate spheres, the character realm and the academic realm, we need to think about how character strengths help students succeed academically.
I'm very interested in curiosity, and I want to ask Mr. Ari, do you think that parents would also be concerned about if their children were very curious of learning something that they think it's not time to learn about? So how do you drive this? Because curiosity is what drives a human being to learn. So how do you deal with this curiosity in your very advanced Finnish educational system?
Yes, and if you think about the modern school nowadays, I think that one key element is that we must open our sight about what is actually the learning, and the learning is not anymore happen in the school, it's actually happen everywhere. If you look at your kids' life, they have the possibilities to learning almost everywhere. So the school role is, of course, somehow to make that kind of good questions, good possibilities for this learning. I speak very much about this kind of school as a revolving doors, which means that the doors are open outside and inside to new ideas and new things to coming inside. So if you offer that kind of school where actually the student understand that this is not the only place, the school is not the only place to learn something. It's organized learning, but it's not the only place. So I'm quite sure that they have that kind of curiosity. And as Paul said, I think that we must be more open about that kind of new possibilities to, how would I say, the society coming also the part of the education. And the parents' role, yes, I think that the parents are actually quite a great possibilities for schools. We used very much our parents in my school that they coming there and telling about their working life, about their education life, how it was when they were in the school, what is the working life, what kind of abilities you need. And my students listen very carefully for that because those people are coming there, let's say that kind of normal life, to telling about why it's important to learn the languages or maths or science or whatever. So it's a great possibilities to use, and I think that the parents actually think about it, that it's a great honor to have that kind of possibility to be part of the learning process inside the school.
Have you ever had a parent coming and telling you, I feel that my child is not learning anything, he's climbing trees, telling me about insects that he or she are seeing. So have you ever had such type of parents, and how would you deal with them?
Yeah, I think that there's a snake in every paradise. There's maybe also that kind of parents in our society. Let's say that we see also in Finland more and more that kind of parents who actually wanted something special treatment or special education just for them child, and I think that's something very big moral question in the Finnish education, because we strongly believe that we offered equal opportunities for everybody. But more and more we find this kind of parents who just wanting something for that one special child, and of course there's coming that kind of discussion that school is doing something wrong, but I think it's also the questions where school must have the answers, and school must be open about the criticism. Otherwise, we are not developing the education system if we just deny that, okay, this is not for us, this is something what we don't accept. I think it's very important to discuss also these things out, and it's a part of that kind of open school idea.
Mr. Paul, what distinguishes our schools in the 21st century?
What distinguishes them?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the schools that are most successful in the 21st century are ones that are able to engage students on lots of different levels at once. And I think how exactly you do that is still an open question for a lot of schools. What I've found in my reporting and my research is that the ones that are really distinguish themselves from the others are ones in which these character strengths are not treated just as an academic subject, but instead where they are sort of saturated in the environment. One of the paradoxes that I came across in my reporting on character education is that some of the teachers who I encountered, who I thought did the best job of developing character in their students, were ones who didn't really talk about character at all. So at these schools I mentioned, they had this list of the 7 character strengths, but some of the teachers who were doing the best job were ones who would never talk about grit or curiosity or character or anything else. And instead, I think what they did that was so effective, and I think what many Finnish schools do that is so effective, was they created a culture in the classroom and in the school as a whole where students felt a sense of belonging and connectedness, and where they also felt they perceived a culture of productive struggle. So where struggle was seen not as a mark of shame, but instead a quality, an experience that meant that these students were really learning, were really pushing themselves. In a lot of North American schools, struggle, I think, is really frowned upon. But in schools that I think are at the top of their game, giving students opportunities to really push themselves, to try new things, to take on projects and challenges that they don't think they can do. That not only seems like an especially effective way to deliver academic subjects, but it also helps students develop on this character level as well. It changes their mindset. It gives them the sense that they can take on challenges that they didn't think possible. And that's the kind of character change, I think, that's going to make a difference not just in the classroom, but far beyond.
Let me ask you this, and do you think that it's real that children can be whatever they want when they grow up, or that this is just a myth?
Well, I think there are, certainly we all have our limitations. So I don't think it's quite right to tell students that they can be whatever they want to be. But I also think that the most important message to give to students is a sense of potential and change. I think that many teachers and many principals can create cultures within the school that tell students you are who you are, and there's no possibility of change. That these are the good students, these are the bad students, and things are never going to change.
What do you think, Mr. Ari?
Yeah, I think that when I read the Emirates new curricula, I was find that you have now the study counselors in Emirates curriculum. And I think that's one very critical point. What we have noticed in our system is that actually giving our students better view about the future and the possibilities there. And I'm quite sure that if you create it here, the study counselor system that way, that it gives the students that kind of great view about the opportunities or possibilities in the future. It will help a lot about the teachers and principals create that kind of school culture where all these things what are important, the life of the young people, somehow coming more visible during the school. So that's the one thing when I think it's a very good step forward.
So it's about what children can be, it's not what they want to be.
Yes, but I think it's a part of both, because sometimes the hopes are very high, and especially sometimes the parents' hopes are even too high. So I think that it's good to have this kind of people who are realistic enough to explain about the possibilities. And if you look at the little bit wider way, I think that we have now many countries that kind of idea that everybody must continue in the universities, and we have the lack of the people who have skillful workers. And if you're looking forward, I think that we need the both, and it's a little bit too narrowed if parents and the students only think that the university is the place to continue. So that's the one example about what the study counselors actually do in our school.
Do you think, Mr. Paul, that it's wrong for parents to put high hopes on their children? Like, let's say a family they have 3 boys, one of them, they want them to be an engineer, which is the case in the Arab world, many countries, and the other one, a physician, and if they have a daughter, they want her to be a teacher, probably a professor. Nowadays, children are open up more for new careers, new jobs. It's not the same in the 21st century. It's not the classical role of jobs that we had 50 years back or even 20 years back. Do you think it's wrong for parents to guide their children, if I may call it guidance?
Sure, it depends what we mean by guidance, right? So I think it's absolutely valuable for parents to have high expectations and high hopes for their children and to expose their children to lots of opportunities, academic and otherwise. But I don't think that it's helpful for parents to choose a profession for their children and then expect their children to just walk exactly the path that's been chosen for them. For 2 reasons. One is that that's not how children develop, that children do best when they follow their own passions and their own curiosity, and that might lead to engineering or teaching, but it might lead somewhere very different. But also because of the way that our economies are developing. As you said, in the 21st century, and when today's young people grow up and enter the workforce, the professional divisions that we have right now may be quite different. And the kinds of professions, the kind of careers that are going to be most stimulating and most rewarding may not exist right now. And so putting kids right now in a sort of narrow box and saying, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to do, really shortchanges them, because it doesn't allow them to to develop the sort of deeper skills, how to think creatively, how to be cognitively flexible, how to communicate, how to work together in teams, all of those sorts of skills that are going to serve them well, whatever career they end up in, whether it exists now or it has yet to be invented.
This question goes for both of you, gentlemen. Are our teachers qualified to deliver these virtues of curiosity and grit that you spoke about in the 21st century? I want to start with
me.
Mr. Paul, yes.
Um, yes, I think our teachers are absolutely qualified to develop those skills. The challenge is that I think we don't have a clear pedagogy, a clear set of instructions, even a clear ability to distinguish between those teachers who are especially good at developing these skills.
How do you distinguish between them?
Well, so I wrote in my most recent book, Helping Children Succeed, about this economist named Kirabo Jackson, who developed this measure by looking at how children change in different classrooms, and he was able to measure or to identify that there were certain classrooms where if you were a student in this teacher's classroom, these were 9th grade math classrooms, not only were you doing better in math, but other things changed within you, right? So you were more likely to show up at school, less likely to become a behavior problem, more likely to do better in all your classes. So something that these teachers were doing was developing students on this character level and not just on the academic level. But that's not a measure that's easy to apply to any individual classroom. I think what we need to learn how to measure is this idea of sort of climate and environment in the classroom. Not just which teachers are able to narrowly follow a specific curriculum, but which teachers are able to create that culture of belonging and challenge within the classroom that changes students on this really deep level that's sometimes hard to measure but is hard to miss when you really speak to those kids.
Mr. Ari, is there a sort of examination where how can we tell if this teacher is a good teacher or not a good teacher? How do you deal with this in Finland?
We don't have any external evaluation of the teachers. We don't have the inspection in our schools, so we are quite lucky for that. So in Finland we say that the education based about the trust, and this is what always happens when I say that we don't have inspection. They applaud me. So it's a quite a big deal, but I must explain a little bit, because we are the one of the very few countries who have actually real opportunities to choose the teachers, very qualified students. So let's say that in Finland the teacher's profession has been very respectful, and it's somehow selected the best students to coming to teachers and teacher training. So it's also that the system itself have developed that kind of situation that we don't need so much about the external evaluation of the education. And it gives us the feel of autonomy, which is very important to running the schools. I think that when teachers and principals have that kind of ownership about the pedagogical thing, pedagogical leadership, it gives much more opportunities than the systems where somebody is, let's say, watching behind your neck, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. So, but of course, I think that you find in every system good teachers, better teachers, and sometimes teachers who are not.
There are always some favorite teachers.
Yeah. But I think that what we actually try to do in these cases is not, let's say, punish, or we believe much more about developing the one person, one teacher, or the teacher who maybe have some problems about his or her work. So it's more about transparency, development, together discussion, and try to find the solutions to make the better outcomes. And I think that's it's a way of also create that kind of atmosphere in the school that everybody felt themselves self-confident.
You know, I remember I had an Arabic teacher, and I'm sure many of the audience would share my experience. She used to beat us on our hands if our handwriting was bad. And that was in KG, and until now, I have a very bad Arabic handwriting. So that didn't work at all. How would the teacher in the 21st century look like, or how would the teacher, or how should he or she look like in the 21st century? I want you both to share your experience on this, and I would start with Mr. Ari, please.
Okay. Definitely, the future teacher looks like is she, because it's this is very.
That's nice. I'm sure many of our audience would love that.
Yeah,
That it's
because-
a she in Finland.
Yeah, is she in Finland? Is she in almost everywhere in the world? So it's a strong commitment, especially for females. But anyway, the future teacher, I think that well educated, of course, but not educated only about the subject, or let's say math, science, whatever he or she will teach. I think that one of the key things is that what is his or her idea about the childhood, how he understands his job as a whole, taking care of the learning, well-being of the students, and many other things what the teacher must do in the school. So we somehow narrow the teacher's profession only what happens inside the classroom. So I like to see the future teacher much more wider, that kind of, not maybe the coach or consult, but a lot of that kind of advisory work, which actually gives students or pupils ideas and problem-solving models and things like that, not so much about the knowledge. Actually, I hope that the ICT age, or the computers, if they bring something good in the school, they are the way where we find this kind of knowledge-based information. And then we have the more time for social interaction and networking inside the schools, and teachers are the leaders of that kind of networking. And maybe the last idea, I hope that the future teachers are also leaders, because we need more leaders than only principals inside the school.
Mr. Paul, so you heard Mr. Ari, he considers that women are leading in education in Finland, which I personally like a lot. So what do you think of that? How would the teacher in the 21st century look like? What are the skills that the teachers should have?
So I loved Ari's answer, and I agree with all of it. So the way I would put it is that I think that the teachers who are going to be successful in the 21st century, in the future, are teachers who not only have an empathy with their students and are able to connect with them, not only have a deep subject knowledge, but also have the ability to engage their students academically on a deep level. So to challenge them, to encourage them to ask complicated questions, to challenge what's being taught, to work together in teams, to take criticism and respond to criticism, a lot of the kinds of approaches to teaching that when I was growing up we didn't always get. But I think that teaching is changing. Schools are changing, and the best schools are changing, I think, most of all, toward a system in which education is much more active, much more engaged, much more teamwork-oriented, and I think that teachers need to learn this new kind of teaching. It's not the same as it used to be, and I think going forward it'll be even more different.
Mr. Ari, how can we measure the success of, or how can you measure the success of the Finnish educational system? Because it's very distinguished from any other education system, even in your neighboring countries.
Yeah. Actually, we never believed that we will be the top of the world, because that was not maybe our goal. We have developed this our new system now around 50 years, and 50 years is the long enough that we can see the results, and that's the one thing that if you change something in the education, you must be very patient about the timelines, because if you say 10 years or 20 years, they are quite a short time in the education system. And there are some things what happen, and I think they are important. All the teacher training from primary, the upper secondary, going for the university special training school. So all the teachers have the university background. Even the kindergarten teachers have quite a good education background. So you can see as a Finnish school system as a whole that those professional people who work there, they have the good training. The principals must have the special qualification to be principals, and that also
What are those qualifications?
It's administrative, or it was administrative when I was make that test almost 25 years ago. Now it's more about what is to be the pedagogical leader, how you work with the teachers, what is your, let's say, moral values, how you use the curriculum as a daily schoolwork. So it's a very practical one. So after that training, you have some kind of idea that what is the profession of the principal, because it's a different one than the teachers in the school. So it's good to understand. So that was the one point. Then I think that this kind of idea about the equal opportunities for all, what is very basis on the Finnish education, was the second big thing that what happens, and which has led us to be one of the most benchmarked school system in the world. And the third one, and this is important, this is maybe most important if I look my eyes, is that we concentrate a lot about the special education needs students. And when you concentrate for those kids who need most the teachers and principals' help, actually that's a so big value, not only for those students, but the whole school. It gives that kind of idea that everybody is very special one in the school, and I think that's the one key point also behind the success of the Finnish school.
How do you see the Finnish education system, Mr. Paul?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't yet visited Finland. I'd love to come and see our
I'm
school.
surprised it
You're
started
welcome.
50
You're
years
welcome.
ago. I thought
Yes,
it's very new.
But from what I've seen and what the rest of the world has seen over the past few years, as we've been focused increasingly on Finland, is that it's a very different model, and I think in some ways it's very surprising, based on the dominant ideas in education in the United States, where I live, and many other places. So this idea that schools function best when they are actually enrolling students fewer hours each day rather than more hours. When students, especially in the early years, have a chance to play and be creative, to try new things, to experiment. So I think that model is incredibly important, and I think especially for young children, the idea that education goes far beyond just the academic subjects that you learn in the classroom is an idea that I hope spreads well beyond Finland.
Why do we see this model only in Finland, Mr. Ari?
I think that it's not only the Finnish model. If you look the worldwide, I see a lot of the progress, or not the same kind of things, but the good things happen all over the world. So, for example, Paul's home country, Canada, is the good example where actually the education is in many states very good level, and they have made something different than the Finnish system. And I think that the best practices of benchmarking the school system is there's always that difficulties that you can't actually move to one system on the other countries. So I think that you can find every system something what is working very well, what you can take a little piece in your own system. But I'm quite sure that every country must create their own way to solve the cases in the education. So this is when the challenge is always the cultural, it's historical, and many other things. So this kind of benchmarking can give you good ideas, but it not give you the whole answer.
There's a very nice thing in UAE students where they get to send students to engage in social work, which is not only in UAE but also in other countries that have some that suffer from starvation or other social issues. And I saw a lot of children who they had a very positive effect on them, and it had a big change in their lives when they decided what they want to do in their careers. How do you see that? How does it affect the children? Like when you get to engage them more in social work, especially now in the 21st century, where children do see war. This is something they haven't seen before.
I mean, I think there is something about the way that we educate a lot of our students that encourages a certain kind of selfishness, that encourages students to think that education is just about getting stuff, getting knowledge, getting skills that are then going to serve them as individuals in the career marketplace. There's a way that we can, I think, emphasize that pretty narrow way of looking at education. But when students are provided the sorts of opportunities, not just to take, but to give, to think about how they can use their emerging skills to help the world, that triggers a change in their thinking, that it gives a purpose to their education, that they're learning what they're learning in school, not just to benefit themselves, but to benefit the nation and the world. And I think those sorts of, you can tell students that, and sometimes they'll believe it, but giving them an opportunity to really personally engage in those moments of helping, of becoming aware of how other people live, those can be transformative, I think, for students in a way that nothing else can.
Let me turn it the other way. Now, we spoke about technology. Through technology and social media, children of all ages, they're seeing other children as refugees, they're seeing war, something that parents could hide before from their children. Now, how can we use technology to develop these virtues in the 21st century?
Well, I think technology is really a double-edged sword when it comes to those sorts of qualities. I think that certainly it can be valuable in terms of exposing children, students to a broader set of ideas, broader understanding of the world. But I think understanding these things through a screen is by definition a shallow way of interacting with other people and with that information. And so to me, giving students the opportunity to face-to-face connect with people from different cultures, different experiences, rather than just through a screen, that's going to create the sort of transformative
Which is
effect.
very nice here because it's a very multicultural society.
Yeah. And I totally agree what Paul say, and I think that even we have all these devices, whatever they are, and all the software and social media, we need the teachers. We maybe need the teachers even more than we need this kind of knowledge-based school. So the teacher role is actually maybe be more aware about this the students' possibility or pupils' possibility, the social interaction, and this kind of dialogue between the cultures and religious. So in the future, I think that some of those things what happen in the old school are made by using the computers, and those new skills and new needs of the 21st century are those things where the teachers concentrate more about their work.
So how does the critical thinking now apply in the Finnish educational system?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge for us, but I think that the critical thinking is a challenge for every school system in the world, because it's let's say that in the teacher education, teachers training, still sometimes you find more about this kind of that we're speaking here and somebody learns something. So we need also in the training system much more this kind of idea about the critical thinking. And as Paul said, that we must also be able to take the criticism, the new questions coming from the pupils, students, and parents, the part of this kind of learning process. So let's see. My point of view that the leaders of the school and the teachers must be more open about that kind of critical discussion and critical thinking in the future. And it's a challenge. I'm very sure about that.
Mr. Paul, we live in a world where the gap between the wealthy and the poor is getting bigger and bigger every day. How does poverty and wealth affect the education in the 21st century?
So I think it has a big effect, especially on this sort of character realm that we're talking about. So in my last two books, How Children Succeed and Helping Children Succeed, I wrote a lot about the research in neuroscience and in psychology about how growing up in particularly stressful situations affects the development of the sort of neurological building blocks that turn into character strengths like perseverance and self-control. And when children grow up in really stressful environments, it's harder. It's harder to focus, to concentrate, to believe in sort of the importance of long-term goals instead of short-term gratification. And so I think we need to be really aware of that. The first thing I think we need to do is try to change the environments that a lot of low-income students are growing up in to protect them from that kind of stress, what some doctors call toxic stress, because it does have a huge effect on their development, and that affects them in this realm. But at the same time, I think that we need to be aware that students who are growing up, or children who are growing up in affluence, in wealth, there is a lot that can be stressful about that situation as well. I think a lot of kids who are growing up in wealth feel a lack of challenge. They feel disconnected from their home and their family. They don't feel the sort of sense of community that I think a lot of young people have and need growing up. So at both ends, I think, of the economic divide, there are some real risks, especially in this character realm.
In Finland, I've heard teachers say that there are no private schools in Finland. Mr. Ari said that just before we got in the room, that there are 3% of private schools in Finland.
Yeah, something
So,
like that.
yeah. So the wealthy children get to share the same virtues and values with the poor children in the same school. So when they grow older, they don't feel any kind of difference, and they build friendships from different cultures and different social levels. So how did this strategy work? Is it a new thing in Finland, or is it old?
Yeah, I think that was the main point when we changed our school system in the 1970s, that we create a system that give equal opportunities everybody, no matter where you live, how rich or poor your family is, and I think that when you look the success in that kind of general point of view, it's a one most important thing, and I think it's maybe the biggest value, biggest moral thing in the Finnish education, that we strongly believe the equality. Actually, the private schools in Finland, with this 3 or 2% of all the schools, they have the same amount of the money using and running the school that the public schools. So we are not able to collect any special money, even we have the private ones. So it's actually quite an interesting way to understand the private sector, that they are not doing the property to running the schools.
So education is not a profit.
No,
Institution
it's not,
in Finland.
It's a totally same in all level. So I think that that's the one of the crucial question, and I think that we try to keep it that way. Even we see nowadays a little bit problem, because Finland is quite an interesting country, that the population is concentrated in one part of the country, and we try to keep the whole country living. So it means that we try to offer these equal opportunities all over the country still.
So what were the challenges that you faced in Finland
Sorry?
once you started implementing the system, the
Sorry?
new system? What were the challenges that you faced?
Challenges. I think that the challenges will be how we keep the school still most wanted working place in our society, how we can recruit the best young peoples becoming teachers, and then how we understand what is the new learning environments in the future, which not mean only the school, but actually the whole society itself, and how we create that kind of atmosphere where the school culture is somehow motivating, well-being, and it gives the young people happiness in their life.
So I think we're running out of time. So I have one last question for both of you, briefly. What is education all about in the 21st century?
I think in the 21st century, education is about thinking more broadly about the skills and the qualities that students need, and trying to come up with new ways of teaching, new ways of organizing schools and organizing curricula that provide students with the very broad set of capacities that they're going to need to succeed in this century.
Mr. Ari?
Yeah, I think that the 21st century education will be very transparent because all the information what happens in education is our hands, so we know what happens all over the world. So the question is that how we develop that kind of school system which actually work best in our countries. So it's a very much about that kind of practical doing and understand that the school is not anymore the only place for learners, and understand that principals and teachers are also part of those learners inside the school.
I want to thank you very much. It was a very, very insightful talk. And I want to thank the audience for their participation.